The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
As it turns out, there are fakes. Thousands of them, police say, as they busted a fraud ring exploiting the genius and fame of renowned Anishinaabe artist Norval Morrisseau. Tonight, we check in with those who inspired police to act. The folks behind the TVO documentary There Are No Fakes, including Canadian musician Kevin Hearn of Barenaked Ladies fame and filmmaker Jamie Kastner. Then, immersive art exhibitions do very big business. But are they art? We'll consider that. It's Wednesday, April 19th, and that's next on The Agenda. The painting was called Spirit Energy of Mother Earth. Said to be the work of renowned Indigenous artist Norval Morrisseau, it was purchased by Canadian musician Kevin Hearn. But several years, a civil lawsuit, and documentary later, 8 people have now been charged in what police say is an art fraud ring responsible for thousands of fake paintings. With us now for more, in Sutton, Quebec, Jonathan Sommer. He's a founding lawyer at Sommer Law. And here in our studio, the aforementioned Kevin Hearn of the Barenaked Ladies, and an art aficionado as well. Great to have you here. And Jonathan, thanks for joining us from the province of Quebec. We want to start with a clip that the police acknowledged that this documentary had a hand in stirring up some of their interest in looking into this case, the art forgery ring around Norval Morrisseau's works. This is from There Are No Fakes. Okay, Sheldon, roll the clip, please.
2 people testified that they were inside an art fraud ring that produced thousands of paintings with black dry brush on them.
Very funny.
That's what was testified to. I'm not kidding.
I don't disagree. Where are they? Did they show any?
They described the whole process.
I can describe many things to you, but if I don't show you, you don't even know it exists.
So you think it was all made up?
I have never seen a fake. Have you?
Well, I've seen...
Have you? I have not. What can I tell you?
Randy Potter here. We're going to show off this beautiful Norval Morrisseau.
Okay, Kevin, to you first. Those paintings we saw at the end, real Norval Morrisseaus or fakes?
In my opinion, they're fakes.
In your opinion? How
Yes.
do we know one way or the other?
Well, there are red flags, which, Jonathan and I have been working on for years, sort of trying to figure out what they are. And, that one painting that was shown at the end that Randy Potter was holding, I'm going to guess it had a black dry brush signature on the back in English, which was one of the red flags that you could look for.
That's a telltale sign that this may not be the real item.
Yes.
Okay.
And there was one on the back of my painting that I purchased.
Which was a red flag for you.
Well, at the time, I didn't know that.
But it became that.
Yes.
Gotcha. Jonathan, we heard the fella, Jim White there, the art dealer, say, there are no fakes. What the heck does that mean?
Well, Kevin and I and a group of people that we're connected with have been for many, many years trying to show that, in fact, there are fakes. And that's been the central argument, that Kevin's painting is one of those paintings, but that there's been a proliferation of fakes for many years. And so there's an opposite faction, and Jim White in that clip is one of those people who will tell you that there are no fakes. So it's just a counter narrative.
Kevin, what turned you on to Norval's work in the first place?
It was the cover of a Bruce Cockburn record called Dancing in the Dragon's Jaws that my older brother had when we were teenagers. And the work resonated with me. I loved it. And I would often see it over the years, and I loved his work, yeah. And
you just decided, I need to have some of that.
Well, I would like to, yeah. When I bought my first house, it was a loft, condo loft. But after the band had some success, I was thinking of decorating, and I thought I would really love to have some of his work on my wall if I could.
And how many pictures of his do you think you purchased ultimately?
3?
3.
Yeah.
And are you somewhat convinced that they are real or not, any of them?
Oh, yeah, 2 of them for sure.
2 are real.
Yeah, and the third one, which is the one Jonathan was mentioning, I lent it to the AGO for a show, and they took it down. They phoned me and said, we think this might be a fake. And so I went back to see Joe McLeod at the gallery where I had purchased it, and he said, well, Kevin, we had a conversation, but during the conversation he said, Kevin, can you point out one court case where they've proven that a painting is fake? And this was kind of a new world for me, so I said no. And he said, well, there you go. There are no fakes.
That's not very encouraging to hear, I presume. No, not at all. Jonathan, tell us about the big arrests that took place in Thunder Bay last month. What went down?
Well, there were 8 people arrested, and you can kind of break them down into 3 groups. So there was what the police are calling the original group, and that's a man by the name of David Voss and his spouse. And then there's another group run by Gary Lamont, who appears in that documentary. He's a convicted drug dealer and a serial sexual predator, and he is being accused of being in charge of a second component of the art fraud. And he was helped by, according to the police, I guess, Benjamin Morisseau, who is the nephew of Norval Morisseau, as well as another painter who assisted in making these fakes, as well as his wife. So that's the second part of it. And then there's a Toronto component. Jim White, who you saw in that clip, and Paul Bremner, who was holds himself out as an art expert, as well as a gentleman by the name of Jeff Cowan, who's from Toronto.
So these charges have been laid. Where in the kind of legal journey are things right now, and how long do you anticipate it'll take before things finish?
Well, my understanding is that the police and the Crown are very much ready to go to trial as soon as possible. They've elected to proceed by direct indictment, which is quite unusual. It essentially is a faster to trial procedure that's reserved for cases where the Crown feels that they have an extremely strong case. And so that's the procedure that's being employed right now. As for when we'll see a trial, I don't know, but I should hope within the next 1.5 to 2 years.
1.5 to 2 years before we see a trial take place. Is that right?
Well, it could be that long. If it happens sooner, both Kevin and I will be very happy about that.
And where do you think it will take place, the trial?
In Thunder Bay.
It will be in Thunder Bay. Do you want to go to this trial when it happens?
I may have to.
As in to testify?
As a victim, yes.
Huh. You ready to spend a lot of time in Thunder Bay over the next 1.5 years?
You know, I love the Sleeping Giant.
It's beautiful, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah, it really is. Does it look like, from your vantage, because you've studied this now, you have dived into the deep end of this pool and have really immersed yourself in this whole story. Are you confident that they've got charges against all of the people who are alleged to have been involved in this?
Well, I know they've interviewed hundreds of people, and I feel that they have a very clear perspective.
What does that mean?
I think they know who all the people are involved, and I believe some have cooperated and some haven't, and I'm grateful for the work that they've done.
Kevin, when you bought that first Morisseau painting, could you have imagined the journey that this has taken you on? I mean, this is kind of crazy, isn't it?
It really is. I had no idea, you know. Jonathan and I kind of compared this journey to fighting the Kraken. You know, one tentacle comes up and we slice it, and then 3 more pop out. You know, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just wanted to sort of find out what the truth was. And I ended up filing a lawsuit against Joe McLeod, but I didn't realize he was connected to a huge network of people that were all organized and trying to stop me from doing that.
Now, Jonathan, do I have this right? There's an estimate I've read out there that there could be thousands of fake Morisseau paintings out there. Is that right?
Well, yes, the police estimate right now is that there's between 4,500 and 6,000 fakes. I think it could even be higher than that.
In which case, no one's ever going to get to the bottom of this, right? I mean, that's just that's a to-do list that's a bit long.
Well, this is a classic problem with large frauds. There was a fraud in the 1950s and 60s. It actually started in the 40s, and with the forging of Group of Seven paintings. And John Delandria recently wrote a book about this called The Great Canadian Art Fraud.
He was on this program talking about it.
Right, and he talks about how the police were able to find a bunch of those fakes, but they estimate that there are large numbers of fakes that still exist in the marketplace. So the work never ends. You're right.
The work never ends. Do you, Kevin, do you have a sense about what this whole scandal has done to Norval Morrisseau's legacy as, after all, one of this country's greatest ever painters?
Oh, yes, it's damaged it, but I believe the work we're doing is a good step in restoring that and building it back.
How important is that aspect of all of this to you?
Well, I admire him as an artist, and I consider myself an artist, so I feel I'm doing something for him in that way.
Did you ever meet him?
I didn't, no.
Bet you'd love to have.
I would have.
Yeah, he died in, what, 2007?
Yeah, he was in Toronto, actually, and I missed him. I was at the Feely Fine Arts Gallery, and I missed him by a few hours. He visited, and but nonetheless, I feel the universe sort of called on me to do something, and so I've tried to follow through as best I could.
So this is a bit of a mission for you right now.
Yes, and the people I met along the way who had been exploited and hurt by this, it made me keep going.
How would you like, if this is a mission that gives your life purpose right now, and I can see that it does, how would you like the mission to end up?
Well, you know, I feel it's very much in sync with the work that I was doing with Gord Downey on The Secret Path. And it's raising awareness, raising understanding of how the story and relationship with Indigenous peoples. And this is by no means my area of expertise, so I'm trying my best to articulate it. But hopefully, understanding and awareness and action, reconciliation, and healing.
Jonathan, I gather that you have even gone so far as to create a kind of a consulting arm of your legal practice that focuses specifically on this issue. So talk to us about your feelings about your mission in this.
Well, my practice has become dominated by art fraud issues, not just Morrisseau, but other ones as well. But I saw that there was a real need for a sort of trustworthy organization that could provide authentication and authenticity investigations in relation to Morrisseau works. And so it's not really part of my law practice, it's a separate entity, and it's called Morrisseau Art Consulting. And I've paired with the man that I believe to be the top expert in the world in terms of determining whether or not a Morrisseau is fake or not. And his name's John Zamanovich. And so I run the business, but he's the one who actually does the investigating and determines whether or not things are real.
I mean, given the size of the problem that we're dealing with out there, do you really think you can make a dent in the art fraud capers that have been plaguing this industry for a very long time now?
Like I said, it's an ongoing battle. You can only do what you can do. And you need the cooperation, of course, of collectors. And that's one of the hardest things, because there's a powerful psychological disincentive to collectors going into court or otherwise publicly arguing that their own collection is worthless in certain cases. You need brave people, and Kevin is a brave person. He was willing to put his well-established reputation on the line to fight this fight. There have been other people that have been very brave. Maggie Hatfield, she was another litigant in these matters. Richie Sinclair, who was the apprentice of Norval Morrisseau, he put his neck out there. You need brave people like that.
Dallas
Thompson, yes, who is, and Amanda Dalby and Tim Tate. These are all people who appear in the film people who were directly involved or connected with the art fraud, and they came forward, they told the truth at great personal risk. These are brave, brave people. And so finding those people isn't always easy, and it can take years, as it did for us.
Kevin, has all of this soured you on what ought to be a joyous experience, namely falling in love with a piece of art and collecting it?
You know, it did for a while. And I had trouble even going into art museums. You know, I didn't enjoy it anymore, but I'm finding through the friendships I made and through the process, it's sort of restoring my faith in humanity, and out of these experiences comes a richer and deeper beauty.
Well, I should ask the follow-up then, which is, do you ever have those moments where you wish you'd never bought the painting in the first place?
Sure, but you know, I rose up to the occasion, and I'm glad I did.
It's you're in a strange place right now, aren't you?
I am. Yes.
It's kind of taken over your life.
You mean here with you at this
No,
odd table?
more metaphysically and metaphorically. Yeah,
I know. But I had this guiding light, Jonathan, with me. He's an amazing human, and I'm grateful for your friendship, Jonathan.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, and you know, I guess at some point, if you can, through your efforts, unintended as they were, if you can clean up what has become a kind of disgraceful, fraudulent situation for decades in this province and country, I mean, that's a serious solid that you'll have done. So I presume that's a big motivating factor in all of this.
I just wanted to get to the truth. You know, I'd be happy to get back to my music.
Spoken like a true artist.
Thank you.
You're all about the truth. There we go. I want to thank both of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views about this. Jonathan Sommer of Sommer Law and Morisseau Art Consulting in Sutton, Quebec. Kevin Hearn from the Bare Naked Ladies here in our studio. Great to be with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Police in Thunder Bay credited the 2019 TVO documentary There Are No Fakes for inspiring an investigation into a massive art forgery ring that's pumped out potentially thousands of counterfeit Norval Morisseau paintings. But while that's a point of pride for the filmmaker, Jamie Kastner, it's not without a caveat. Those same police now want access to all his raw footage. With us from Dusseldorf, Germany, where he's working on a new documentary, is Jamie Kastner with an explanation. Hi, Jamie. Good to see you again. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Good to see you, Steve.
Excellent. Let's start with a clip from the documentary, There Are No Fakes. This clip shows us the extent of the fraud in counterfeit Norval Morisseau works. Sheldon, if you would, let's have the clip.
We realized that there was probably around 3,000 fake paintings out there, and they were selling in the range of $10,000. We're talking $30 million. This is the greatest art scam by far in all Canadian history. There have always been fakes by famous painters, but none of them that even begin to be on this scale. 3,000 fake paintings is a lot of fake paintings. So I'm not surprised that many people opposed our view that the paintings were fakes.
That's Donald Robinson of Kinsman Robinson Galleries, one of the characters in your documentary. Jamie, let's start with this. What's your understanding of how influential your documentary was in getting the police to look into this in the first place?
Well, I actually received a call from the lead investigator from the Thunder Bay Police. Ultimately, it's been a joint effort between Thunder Bay and Ontario forces. But Detective Jason Ryback called me soon after the film had its festival premiere, and he had seen it and basically told me that they were opening an investigation based on the film. So I was very gratified, and that was back in 2019. So I've known since then that it's been going on.
So is that to say that they really didn't know anything about this until they saw your documentary?
I believe the current crop of officers, who are the ones who have finally made something stick on this case, that's correct, had not been aware of it until they saw the documentary. I mean, this story has actually been in the headlines since at least 2000. And it has, prior to the documentary, it was always treated in a very even-handed way. It was always alleged fakes, and there was sort of, it was being journalistically balanced to death, you might say. Only since the documentary has come out, I guess, people in general in the media and in law enforcement have taken the notion that these are very likely fakes, and we're just talking about how many and who are doing them and how to stop them.
And what did you discover about how long this fakery had been going on for?
Well, as I said, even when I got involved in the story, around 2016, 2017, it had already, the serious allegations, including by Don Robinson, who was Morisot's official dealer for the last 20 years of Morisot's life, had been quoted in stories since the I believe it was 2000, he and other people. So it was at least as long as that these serious concerns about widespread fakes have been out there.
So you were the inspiration, or at least the documentary that you put forward was a big help to the police in getting them interested in it. So I guess we can say that for a while you were allies, but the two of you and the police, are now at loggerheads over something. You want to explain what the problem is?
Well, I would hope that we're still allies on this point. I'm sure we both have the same aim, which is bringing the wrongdoers to justice. It's just a question of means. I think that we're disagreeing about, at least as far as one point goes. The police have told me that they want to seize all the raw footage. In fact, they have seized at this point all the raw footage from my documentary. And while I fully support their investigation and their attempts to prosecute the fraudsters, as a journalist and a filmmaker, it goes against the foundation of what I and we do to make talking to us synonymous with talking to the police, which is in effect what turning over all my raw footage, being forced to turn over all my raw footage accomplishes. When I got people to trust me to talk about this, people from both sides of this story, which I think was essential to presenting the story in a way that people, including the police, are now taking seriously enough to take this action on. It was not with the understanding that I would just be turning it all over to the cops. And you don't have to think that deeply about it to understand that people in vulnerable situations would not necessarily spill their guts to the cops as they would in the context of a feature film in which they have confidence that they're going to be treated fairly.
Let's just understand how
cops don't treat people fairly, but it's apples and oranges. That's all.
Sure. No, I take your point, but tell me what legal hoops the police had to jump through in order to get that footage, or as you say, you were obliged to turn over that footage to them in the first place.
Well, as I say, I have been in occasional and friendly dialogue with one officer in particular who's involved in this investigation. And he asked me for the footage. And I've never been in this situation before. So initially, I was slightly conflicted, thinking, well, yeah, I want to support this guy. And then I thought, well, I can't. I'm a journalist and a filmmaker, and I can't just turn it over. So I said, sorry, I can't. He basically said, well, we can do this the easy or the hard way. The hard way, and I said, I guess it's going to be the hard way, which it turns out to be the police and the Crown getting what's called a production order, which is basically, legally forcing me to turn over the footage. And if I refuse to do so, I'm committing a crime, in effect. So I agreed. I had to get a lawyer and turn over the footage. They sent an officer around to the lawyer's office, is what we finally settled on. And the 17 interviews, totaling about 55 hours of material, is sitting apparently sealed for the time being in a courthouse in Thunder Bay.
Now, is that material sealed because you've appealed that decision and therefore the whole thing's in stasis for the moment?
Basically, yes. We are trying to fight this production order, and while this discussion is ongoing, at least until early June, I believe, it remains sealed.
And you are satisfied that, in fact, that is the case. The material is sealed and is not being looked at yet.
I am satisfied, yes.
Okay, let's take another look at a clip from your documentary. We're going to look at another one of the characters with the Donald Kinsman Gallery. Donald Kinsman, whose art gallery, Kinsman Robinson, sold Morisot paintings for decades. So let's take a look at that. Sheldon, if you would.
At that time, I was under severe stress. Even my life had been threatened. But we got to do something about this guy. Donald Robinson, are you listening? What you going to do when they come for you? That made me feel
it's not only a mental harassment, but there was also a physical danger that was really present at that time.
I've seen on the Richie Sinclair, that freaking scumbag. Yeah.
Well, first the Otavnik threats about having people hunting me down and are going to find you. And meanwhile, I'm like, I'm not even hiding.
If I had 6 months to live, I'd shoot that. Yeah, I did. If I had 6 months to live, I'd shoot him. Who? Richie Sinclair.
Okay, one of the things your documentary definitely did was unmask the fact that there are a lot of really dangerous bad apples involved in this whole thing. And, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, uttering a death threat as publicly as that fellow just did is not a legal act. That's in the documentary. Do you think there's anything in the outtakes that might contextualize what we just saw in a way that could potentially justify even further the police's desire to get their hands on those outtakes?
I can only speculate as to why the police want the raw footage. But as I said to the investigator, I mean, first of all, I don't believe that material from a film can be used to prosecute someone. It's hearsay, as far as I understand it. So he didn't say it under oath. He didn't say it in a court or to a police officer. But aside from that, I use the good material in the film. You can see the death threat is in the film. There are also other exponentially offensive, horrible things that people say when they relaxed in my company, as is often the case, that we put in the film. So no, I don't think that, I mean, how much more context do you need to understand what that guy is saying? I put all the juicy, relevant bits in the film that would best reveal people's character and motivation.
Okay, I certainly understand the point of principle upon which you're standing. You as a filmmaker and a journalist don't want to be seen as being somehow an arm of the police. On the other hand, I wonder if there is a part of you that acknowledges that these guys are really bad, in some cases evil people who have done awful things and who might do awful things still. Is there a part of you that says, geez, maybe I should be cooperating with the police because they really do need to come to justice, these guys?
In effect, I already have cooperated by the police in having handed them their investigation on a platter, on having gotten these people, as a journalist and filmmaker, to reveal themselves perhaps more honestly and forthrightly than they would if they had been talking to a cop. And by the way, I was building on research that had been done, by Kevin Hearn, by his lawyer Jonathan Sommer, and by a number of people, I think, before even all of us, who have preferred to remain, in the shadows. But so we built on all this. The film is the product of all of that work, and I think my part of what I brought to it is presenting these people that in an even-handed, journalistically balanced way. Nevertheless, of course, I do have my own opinions about it, and no doubt that comes out in the way the film is cut. Though I don't believe, and nobody has said to me that they don't feel they got a fair shake. So I think I've already done my job, and I think the police, who have far greater resources, who have conducted something like 271 interviews to my 17, including with the vast majority of the people I already interviewed, they have their resources, they have their methods, and I wish them well.
In terms of your next move, what is your lawyer advising you to do?
I believe the standard for getting a production order to force someone like me to turn over his footage is that they cannot get the material any other way. I think by their own account in the press conference they held and other press they've done, the numbers I'm quoting, I'm citing you on the number of statements they received and all the work they did with multiple police forces collaborating across the country and beyond, is a testament to the fact that they actually, and the fact that they were able to make the arrest at all is a testament to the fact that they have been able to get the material by other means. So I would say that essentially that's what we have to underscore to the judge.
Okay. Jamie, we're going to continue to watch this story with interest and may call on you again down the road to do so. While I've got you here, though, you've got a documentary coming up this fall on TVO with, I presume, a much less unsavory group of characters than the one you were just working on related to the art fraud. What's Charlotte's Castle about?
I mean, I don't like to eschew unsavory characters altogether, no matter how genteel the subject matter. Charlotte's Castle, my forthcoming TVO doc, is an offbeat housing crisis story that involves a quirky cast of inhabitants in the oldest rental building in Toronto, which is near Spadina and Bloor, goes back to 1905, and has long housed a cast of quirky, colorful, eccentric, creative types who find themselves somewhat besieged when a Dutch developer buys the building and threatens to renovate and jack up the rent.
Well, you use the word threaten. Do I infer from that there may be death threats in this one as well?
Stand by.
Okay, we shall do that. Charlotte's Castle, looking forward to that this fall. Good luck on the documentary you're working on right now in Germany, and we thank you for joining us on TVO tonight.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Van Gogh's sunflowers towering several stories tall. Monet's water lilies, so large you could feel like you could hop from one to the other. Such is the stuff of multimedia presentations, or immersive art exhibitions, as they're called. These shows have taken audiences by storm, launching at about the same time that pandemic lockdowns gave us very few outings to attend. But their appeal remains as audiences show up in droves across Canada and around the world. But for all the Instagrammable moments they provide, do they really do justice to the art? Let's ask Philippe Blanchard. He is Acting Associate Dean and Chair of the Experimental Animation Program at Oakhead University here in Toronto. And Kate Taylor is here. She's the visual art critic at the Globe and Mail, and it's great to have you two in our studio for this conversation. We want to start by showing you some pictures. Not real pictures, I hasten to add. But Sheldon, you want to bring these up? These are some snaps that I took myself at the Immersive Van Gogh exhibit a few years ago in Toronto when it came. And this is, I mean, you can see the person in the foreground. I think that's the former culture minister for Ontario, actually, Lisa MacLeod. So that gives you a sense of how absolutely massive, yes, these things truly are. We've got a few shots here. There's Lisa MacLeod again. And if you haven't seen these shows before, you are absolutely immersed by, you know, how big it is, and you are surrounded by the whole thing. Kate, I guess I want to start with you. Did you see this exhibit?
I did.
And what'd you think?
I didn't like it. I feel it exploits the artist.
Exploits?
Well, You know, Van Gogh's long dead, obviously, which is one of the reasons these shows can do this, because, of course, Van Gogh, Monet, they're long off copyright. Although the producers do license the photography they're using, particularly very high quality, obviously, digital images. But, you know, Van Gogh didn't paint his paintings 6 stories tall. He didn't animate them. I feel it's disrespectful of the artist's original intentions. And suggests that somehow the art is lacking, that art, this would be so much more fun if art were just animated and moved. So I found it I found it alienating, actually, as an experience. You're sort of blasted with this stuff. And the Monet, at certain points, things like the water lilies or some of his landscapes, seascapes, they would just become mud. They'd been enlarged to a point you couldn't read it, you didn't know what it was.
For those people who are listening to us on podcast right now who did not see those images, could you just, in the way that you would, describe what you think is going on here?
Sure. As Kate mentioned, the creators of the show would have used these high-resolution digital images and with an array of projectors, mapped them onto the space and the floor, and then augmenting them with animation, so that the original paintings, in effect, are digitally cut up into layers and then animated over time.
And they kind of move, and there's music, and it's a show. You've seen it. What'd you think?
Well, although I haven't seen that particular immersive show, speaking about other kind of similar immersive productions, I would say that although I concur with Kate in terms of the importance of seeing art in its original form or context, I do see on the other side that it might act as a gateway for audiences that may not have access or the habit of going to museums and galleries. So I'm a bit divided on the subject, I would say, but I do think that immersive art as a contemporary form can really play an important role in that respect.
Does it bother you that this is clearly not what Van Gogh had in mind for his work somewhere down the road?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because for me, one, it's hard, we're talking about the 19th century, it's hard to know. Van Gogh, of course, could have never imagined what this work would look like in the future. And in some ways, art is not solely an artifact, and in some ways it must have a life after the time it was created in some ways. And I also think that if, it's not everyone can go to the MoMA or to
Museum of Modern Art in New York.
There's a case to be made to sort of expand the audience in some respects, yeah.
Kate, how about that? I mean, obviously Van Gogh didn't plan to have that kind of animation and this kind of technology.
No, and I agree with Philippe that art does not stand still, and our attitudes to it change, obviously, and how we perceive something and whether it's fashionable or not changes greatly over decades and centuries. And these artists, I mean, in the case of Van Gogh and Monet and also Klimt, they predate any of this technology. I mean, their careers are film was just in its infancy, right? So obviously we have to, and the greatness of their art to some extent is that we're still interested in it, right? Is that so many decades later, we still want to engage with it. My fear, I guess, about the gateway argument, which is often made in the arts, right, is that you have something quite popular and this will bring people to perhaps more, sophisticated or mature tastes. And,
who might otherwise not be interested in looking at this
otherwise
work.
go. And I mean, if you can't go to a museum and are very interested in art, there are excellent reproductions, without the bells and whistles and animation and music and whatever, just very good reproductions if you want to look at a painting without actually being able to visit. There is a difference in seeing art in the flesh, which is why I think people who care about art always encourage others to go to museums.
There definitely is, but let me jump in on that. Are you saying this is wrong?
Well, I worry that it actually has the reverse effect of the Gateway, that rather than leading people towards the museums, on the contrary, it leads museums towards thinking our art isn't good enough. We've got to make it more immersive for people to appreciate it. And I thought there was a good example here in Toronto just before the pandemic with the Yayoi Kusama show, the Japanese artist who does the infinity rooms, the mirrored boxes, and you go inside, and the effects are incredible. They're like you're on a different planet or in some vast city, or they're very, very effective works. But that's not all her work. She's done all kinds of other work, and just, sort of classic static, if you will, painting. And the show at the AGO had a lot of that earlier work and made a very strong case that she was a very important figure in the 1960s. But I don't think, prior to her doing the Infinity Rooms, but I don't think the audiences got that, and I don't think they got that because they were lining up to get into the Infinity boxes, and that's all they did. And they didn't see the rest of the show. And so, the AGO had a very worthy show, but that wasn't what people were really there for. They were just there for that one immersive element.
Let me put that to Philippe. Do you worry that museums, more traditional museums, will feel they can't compete with this newfangled stuff, and therefore it kind of defeats the cause?
I agree with Kate that in some respects, there's a case for sort of a contemplative experience of art with the original artwork. And to really get into that, the nuance of the work, but also there's a case for more immersive and spectacular art. I would say my concern is that we're dealing with commercial ventures that have, in some ways, are quite expensive to produce, and that tends to lower the tolerance for risk and to introduce new work by contemporary artists, local artists, emerging people, artists of color, for example, and that there's a tendency to take sort of a safe route with artists and images that have been seen already, such as the Van Gogh works, which have been reproduced and are familiar and household names. So I think, for me, I think immersive art has a role to play, but it maybe needs to be opened to and expanded to include different voices.
Well, let me try this. Kate, they say that when you are exposed to art, you should trust your emotions. And however you react emotionally to a particular something, that's an honest reaction. When I went to see the Van Gogh 3 years ago now, I talked to a lot of people who were in there at the same time I was. Everybody loved it. Everybody really reacted very positively to it. Do we have to take that into account?
Well, yeah, you're not going to, and that's why, I guess that's what my problem with the Gateway argument is that it's kind of condescending to audiences to say, well, this is very nice, and we're sure you're going to mature towards this other more sophisticated experience. It's like, if this people like, fine, it's their money, they can go spend it. I don't, as someone who appreciates those original paintings, even if some of them I would have only ever seen in reproduction, for me, I didn't like it, and I didn't like it because of particular effects it achieved. For example, it took Van Gogh's portraits, and there's a reason a portrait is about this big, right? Mm-hmm. It's the size of a person's head, and so a good portrait you have this relationship with. You're looking at the person, and one of the reasons why Van Gogh is so important was because he played with, prior to that kind of post-impressionist work, impressionism, post-impressionism, a portrait would be very, very realistic, and it'd almost be like a photo, right? And that was what the artist was attempting. Whereas someone like Van Gogh with much, much looser brushwork, you get both the effect of you're looking at a person, like his postman, for example. You're looking at the postman in Arles, but you're also looking at a pattern on the surface, very much influenced by Japanese art. And so there's this push-pull between and I found that effect, which to this day, I don't know if I've ever seen the postman in real life. I think I've only seen it in reproduction, but to this day, if I see a reproduction of it, I think about that. Well, you blow it up to 6 stories and you've completely lost what this painting's about. So, other people, it's bright, it's colorful, it's fun, there's fun music, it's an outing. I'm not surprised people like it, but to me, it's not really doing anything for that work. And on the contrary, to me, it's taking away from the work.
Let's do another one here, shall we? let's bring up the current exhibit in London, UK. There it is, British artist David Hockney. And this is, and you know, unlike Vincent van Gogh, he has both
living.
ears and is very much alive.
Yeah.
This is huge. Again, for those listening on podcast, this is absolutely enormous. The scale is fantastic. Let's keep scrolling through these pictures if we can, Sheldon. Again, massive scale, people very small, incredible colors. Well, again, brilliant colors. Philippe, as you look at this, do you have an emotional reaction to what you see?
I would love to see this show. I think in terms of our conversation, and I think the Hockney example is a really good one of a contemporary or living artist whose practice through the years has really embraced new technologies. So
does that make a difference here?
I think it does, because in some ways I think that layer of meaning is sort of part of the experience, and I think the artist would have had more of a agency in how the work is shown. But also, I think Hockney's worked a lot with a theater, stage design, and photo montage, and even digital painting on iPads. So I really see that throughout his career, there's been a real desire to tackle and engage with new technological developments. And that, to me, is something that makes a show like that extremely engaging. Because
let me put that to Kate. The fact that Hockney is on board for this.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference.
Huge difference for you.
I mean, Hockney is an artist who's always enthusiastically participated in the commercialization of his work. So he's a very popular artist. These were not, from my understanding, paintings that were created for this, although there's some painting on iPad effects in the show, but a lot of it's existing work of his that he is then subjecting to this treatment. But that's fine. That's his choice as an artist, and he wishes to be represented in this way. And the notion that you could kind of walk into his paintings in that way. And I agree with Philippe that because he's someone who's following the technology, there's an issue that, you know, a painting is a magic trick, right? It's a flat surface that gives you the illusion of three dimensions. And having a contemporary artist who's worked for a long time on those flat surfaces, and Hockney, of course, creates big, large paintings. He likes big scale. Having then say, okay, I'm going to try taking that the next step and see if I can then take my existing paintings and turn them into something you can walk into. Yeah, I think it makes a difference because it's his choice as an artist.
You're like a Supreme Court judge here, eh? Original intent matters.
Well, I do take Philippe's point that, you know, art isn't just artifact and it can't be static. And, you know, one of the most horrible examples of that is the big theft in Boston at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And Isabella Stewart Gardner was a 19th century philanthropist who had cut this wonderful collection of art that she turned into a museum. But she insisted in her will that her installation of the way the paintings were hung would never be changed. And so when there was that horrible theft, and about half a dozen works were stolen from the collection, including several Rembrandts, now they just have empty frames there because Isabella said, you're not going to hang it any other way. Well, that's, to me, egomaniacal and naive. I mean, it suggests future generations won't view art differently. And obviously we do. I mean, there are all sorts of trends in art that we deeply value today that were not, you know, Van Gogh being the obvious example, right? The man who sold one painting in his lifetime. Van Gogh's contemporaries did not see what was, from our point of view, didn't see what was right in front of them, and now we think these are most valuable paintings in the world.
Well, shall we take a look at one? Here are a couple of images. These, again, courtesy of yours truly. I had the good fortune to take a trip to New York a few weeks ago and went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and snapped a shot of this gorgeous painting by Vincent van Gogh. And just so I wouldn't forget that it was him, Sheldon, what did I do? Yes, there's the big close-up of his signature at the bottom, just Vincent 87, that's all it says. Okay, Philippe, to stand in front of that not all that large painting, static, admittedly Vincent van Gogh, but it's there. It's not doing anything, it's not moving, there's no music, there's not, you know, it doesn't dwarf the people who are standing watching it. Do you think that kind of exhibit is going to have difficulty competing with these immersive shows that are now so huge maybe they can't compete anymore.
I would doubt that in a way, because I think the aura of the original work, and to see even, for example, the pigment that was used and how the subtle shades of paint can never be fully reproduced digitally, I think there's an attraction to that experience. I think that'll never go away. So in a way, I see that immersive art and original paintings maybe will coexist.
Well, okay, Kate, I'm going to put that to you, because I'll confess, to stand there in front of a Vincent van Gogh painting and have as much time as I want to just sort of look at it and take it all in, it's a pretty cosmic experience, pretty fantastic. Is that experience at all adversely affected by the fact that his work has now been put into these immersive exhibits with all the bells and whistles, et cetera?
Well, probably not for you, because you've gone to seek out the original. I guess then the question is, well, will the crowd who's enjoying the immersive show, will they understand that this isn't what the original paintings are? I think one of my problems with the immersive shows is they trade so heavily simply on the fame of the name, right? It's like the way the Mona Lisa. I mean, to me, the Mona Lisa is meaningless. I've seen it reproduced so many times, I don't know what it is.
It's very disappointing when you see it in real life,
when you
isn't
go,
it? Yeah.
and it's about this big,
right?
That's
right.
And there's this huge crowd, and you can't get close,
Right.
and you.
And it's behind glass.
And it's behind, and there are guards all over, whatever.
Yes.
So it's like it's been completely destroyed, whatever it was once upon a time, just because of its fame. And similarly with Van Gogh. Van Gogh is so famous partly because his story is so dramatic, right? The person who never sold anything, and the ear, and all the drama of his life. And then he produced these paintings that we value so much. And so an awful lot of it is about trading on that fame and also creating an event. And obviously these immersive shows are produced by producers of entertainment, and it's very much about creating an event, and of course creating an event that then you can take your shot, put it on Instagram, and say, here I was.
Okay, got to pick up on that, because again, at both the immersive art exhibit and then in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you do see people taking selfies of themselves. Can you imagine, like a gorgeous masterpiece on the wall there, and somebody's doing the selfie thing to get themselves in front of that picture? Has the need for people to do that robbed all genuineness out of the experience of going to a gallery now? I don't know, what do you think, Philippe?
Well, I would agree that it's important to, I think one learns to appreciate the slow pace and the contemplative nature of sitting with an artwork or standing in front of an artwork. And it's true that to look at paintings as a mediated experience through social media, through our own phones, it does take away from that contemplative moment. And I think where one sort of really sense the time that was taken to create the work and relates it to one's personal experience of time in the space. So I guess I'm a bit ambivalent about. I'm sort of getting a bit closer to Kate's argument or Kate's point on that, I think.
Okay, the Instagrammable moment. What's that done to appreciation of art nowadays?
Well, there was that thing where we now we're all so saturated with images, and we're all sort of continually scrolling, that we don't really think an experience is real unless we have this record of it. And there is, the reason people take pictures at a wedding, right, is maybe at your wedding you were so nervous and so out of it that actually it's a good idea to have some pictures afterwards. Oh yeah, we did do this, kind of. So I don't have a problem with that. That photography is more than 100 years old now. I don't have a problem with that sense of a record. And I think these events are created so you can have this sort of, you can say, I was here, right? I was here. I have the record of this to show I was here. I actually have a lot more problem where people are starting to, in effect, fake experience for their Instagram account, which has more to do, I guess, with day-to-day. You know, here I am having a picnic, here I am, whatever, that if you start to sort of interfere in your own experience like that, what kind of life are you living? But I actually think these shows, the spectacle element of it is, it's made for that. That's kind of the relationship, and people are seeking that out. I certainly, when I went to the immersive Van Gogh, there was a fair amount of that. I remember it was at the height of the pandemic, and we were to keep masks on, and there was one woman who, God damn it, she was going to get a selfie without her mask on. And the security guard would come up and tell her to put it on, and she'd take it off. So, and I kind of felt, well, that's kind of what she's here for.
Yeah. Do you think, just in our last couple of minutes here, do you think, Philippe, that these immersive exhibits are a fad, or are they here to stay?
It's a good question. I think they're here to stay. I think that the technology that's been developed and the expertise that has been developed around these, I think there's a reason why they're popular. I think there's in some respects, well, let me reframe that actually. I think that immersive art was always with us. If you think of experiencing a cathedral or walking into a temple, or architectural experiences of art, have always existed. And I think these immersive productions are kind of a new version of something that's been around. But I think there's a need for audiences or a desire to experience art in a very embodied and three-dimensional way. So I think that they are going to stick around in one form or another.
I better not see you in front of the Mona Lisa on Facebook in a selfie. I better not see that shot anywhere, Philippe. Anyway, that's Philippe Blanchard from OCAD University, Kate Taylor from the Globe and Mail. Thanks to the both of you for coming in tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Top secret documents leaked in the United States recently warned that Canada's pipelines were vulnerable to hackers. Tomorrow, Jayan Jagannathan will get a read on that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. And Jayan, we'll see you here tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.